Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining promptly. We will start in a couple of minutes. Thank you. Good morning once again, and thank you for joining. As mentioned at the retreat, we will be having writing, uh, this writing sessions, and today we want to look at the basics of writing. If you can hear me, please indicate maybe with a thumbs up or something, or you can speak if you want to, so that I'm sure that you can hear me. Hello, can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can, sir.
Yes, sir. We hear you.
Okay,
We can hear
okay,
you, sir.
okay, thank you. So we will start with the basics. So today we'll look at a number of things. This will be a general overview. You remember that we were saying during the retreat that our reporting can take different forms. It can be maybe a brief, or it can be uh, a project report or a journal article, which means that the structure will vary. This is one structure. If, for instance, you're writing a report, this is what the structure will look like. Usually, there is an executive summary, and then you have those different sections that we have here. In a brief, you can also have an executive summary, and then you have these different sections that we have in this structure B. In a journal article, rather than uh, have an executive summary, what we will have is an abstract, which is also a summary of the entire work, and it's structured this way, usually starting with an introduction, then your methods, then the results and the discussion, and then conclusion and references. The rule of the thumb is that you begin with an outline. It's always important to have an outline. The outline is like your foundation upon which you build. It gives structure to what's your to what you're writing. I want to see. Okay, I don't know whether you can see this sample outline. So if I am writing, I can create an outline that looks somewhat like this: the introduction, and then the different things to be discussed in the introduction. Eventually, you will develop each bullet point into a full paragraph, So this is what an outline looks like. And it's ideal that we start with an outline. A major mistake people make is that they begin to write without having an outline, and it usually doesn't turn out well. Okay, so it's good that we begin with an outline. One thing we should give attention to is the language. And like we said during the retreat, your audience matters. Who are the people you're targeting with your writing? That's going to determine whether your language will determine how formal your language will be and how technical the writing can be. If, for instance, you're targeting experts, maybe academics, researchers, then you need to be a little technical. If you're writing for maybe policymakers or the general population, then you need to be less technical and make the writing more simplified. But in all, it's good that the writing is formal. It should be formal language. If you're targeting policymakers, programmers, then you should consider very carefully the option of infographics. You may need to incorporate more infographics than you would if you were communicating with maybe researchers. And then if it is a brief, then there should be a call to action, because the brief naturally is solution focused. One question I think it's important we also answer is, who is an author? Who exactly qualifies to be credited with authorship? It's important because often we see some abnormal situations. Sometimes someone says, "Oh, I'm the big person here. I don't need to contribute to the writing because I'm the senior person. You have to put my name on the list of authors." Some will even insist I have to be the first author. But such things are unethical and they're unprofessional. There are clear guidelines for determining authorship. And if we go online, if we use this link that we have here, we will see this international committee, I think International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. That committee has a very clear, and that's the guideline that's been adopted across sections. So the first thing is that whoever is going to be credited with authorship must contribute substantially to the conception or the design of the study, or the acquisition, that is acquiring the data used for the study, the acquisition, the analysis, or the interpretation of data for the work. And I would like that we carefully think through this. The implication of what we have just read is that it's not compulsory that somebody has been part of the conception or the design of a study, for instance. It is, and that's why you have all there. That is, if the person has not substantially contributed to designing the study or conceiving the idea, but the person has made substantial contribution to acquiring the data, analyzing the data, or interpreting the data, then that person is qualified to be credited with authorship. So that's the first criterion. And then the next thing is and. So no longer or. So you must meet the first criterion, and you must have contributed to drafting the work or reviewing it critically for important intellectual content. That's the second box that an author must tick. And final approval of the version to be published, which means that even if you do all of both of 1 and 2, and you don't give final approval of the version to be published, you're still not qualified to be credited with authorship. And then finally, agreements to be accountable for all aspects of the work in ensuring that questions related to the accuracy or integrity of any part of the work are appropriately investigated and resolved. So this last one talks about accountability. If you're not, if you will not agree to be held accountable for all the aspects of the work, then you can't be credited with authorship. So this is something we should consider very carefully. One example I like to reference is the Demographic and Health Survey. The Demographic and Health Survey is a very big survey. It's conducted in several countries of the world. Sometimes people simply acquire the data and analyze the data and then publish. They can be credited with authorship even though they were never part of the design of that study. But they have been involved in the analysis, maybe in acquiring the data or in analyzing or in interpreting the data. Okay. And then drafting. So it's either you are the one writing the paper or you are critically reviewing it. If you don't do either of these, then you can't be credited with authorship. And then you must give approval for the version to be published, to be submitted. And then finally, disagreements to being held accountable for all aspects of the work. A major issue that also comes up in academic writing is the positioning. Who will be the first author? Who takes up that position of first author? Well, usually, there is an error here. The first author makes the most contribution. I wrote last, it should be the most. The first author is the one that makes the most contribution to the work. The first author, in my estimation, does close to 80% or more of the writing. That is the actual writing, the article that's to be published. The first author does about 80% at the minimum of that work. The first author can also be the corresponding author. And the best thing or the best practice is for the first author to also be the corresponding author. The corresponding author corresponds or exchanges mails with the journal and with the public. Usually it is the corresponding author's email address that's published with the article. And then another question is, who is the last author? The last author usually is the senior person, the person who provides leadership or mentorship, the senior, maybe academic person in that group takes that position of last author. For the corresponding author, a major question that we also need to ask is what email address should be used. Of course, it should be the email address of the corresponding author. But I'll also like to point out that, yes, institutions usually prefer that the institutional email is used, which is not a bad idea, but there is a danger attached to that, because when people move on, if, for instance, I use my University of Lagos email address if I leave that system, that address will be disabled, which means that if people need, and sometimes people continue to reach out to the corresponding author up to 10 years, 20 years after the article has been published. And so if that email address is disabled, then that's a problem. It means they can't reach the corresponding author. One way to handle this is to use your personal email and then combine the personal email with your institutional email address. Those personal email addresses, for instance, mine, michaelkunji@gmail.com, they are more enduring. You could use one for, in fact, I have one email address that I have used for well over 20 years. But sometimes institutional addresses change, so we should keep this in mind. If we must use the institutional address, then we have to combine it. It is advisable that it is combined with a personal or a more permanent email address. Okay, so here we have positions. A friend sent this to me some years back, that this is what academic writing looks like. You'll see the first author. The first author is the one doing the digging, doing all the work there. Others are contributing, and then even sometimes it looks as though they're just supervising and making comments about what the first author is doing. And I mean, it is not for nothing that we mention only the name of the first author, and all the others, even if there are 10 or more, all of them become et al. Okay, so there are some tips here for writing. 5 C's, I have tagged them. The first one, writing has to be clear. The message must never be lost. The message should be clear. It should not be ambiguous. Another C is that it has to be concise. A good writer is one who has learned to use the fewest words possible to pass across his or her message. Okay, so there should be precision. It should be concise in writing, and there are several examples of this. We should also be consistent in writing, in language, and in style. If, for instance, you're doing a study of sexual exploitation and abuse, it will be wrong somewhere along the line to start writing sexual abuse and exploitation, even though you say it's the same thing. But it's key that we're consistent. If you're writing about a particular subject matter, there could be close maybe synonyms to that particular word or concept, but it is ideal that you stick with one. If you're using advocacy, if you're using maybe collaboration, if you say you're studying collaboration, stick to collaboration. You don't come later to say you're studying partnership. Of course, you could say it's the same thing, but it's good to be consistent in the writing. And then the writing itself should be concentrated. And by this, I mean it should be focused. Sometimes people leap in their writing. That is, you're writing a particular thing, and then you just jump away from that thing and you move on to another thing that is not related. And this is a major problem in scholarly writing. The writing should be very, very focused. One way to deal with this is to develop our ideas in a very systematic way. And what do I mean? Every paragraph should contain an idea. So if you're writing, your idea statement is the first statement of the paragraph. Then that can be followed with evidence. So you can bring a study that supports that idea that you have put forward in your first statement. And then you can also support that with examples. But everything in that paragraph should speak to that idea. So the first thing in your paragraph is your idea statement. That is a statement that sums up what that paragraph is about. So if your first sentence, if someone reads your first sentence and can't make sense of the idea you're passing across, then there is a problem. So it's ideal that you begin with an idea statement and then you bring evidence, maybe from previous studies that you will cite to support that particular idea, or you can bring examples to support that particular idea. The fifth C is currency. The writing has to be current. If, for instance, there is a census that says the population of Nigeria is 180 million people. The moment there is another census that says the population is 250 million, it does not make sense to write and state that the population of Nigeria is 180 because it is no longer current. If you look at maybe the DHS is done every 5 years. The moment the latest report is out, it becomes like a crime, like an offense to cite, except you want to maybe show trend. But apart from that, if you want to show the state of a particular problem, if, for instance, you're interested in talking about maternal mortality, or you're talking about the total fertility rate, once there is a newer version of the DHS, you can no longer cite the 2018 DHS because you never can tell where that will go, and then it will be queried. So these are things we should keep in mind as we write. We should be clear, we should be concise, we should be consistent, the writing should be concentrated, and the writing should be current. These are tools that we need to be very familiar with. We should learn to use these tools. They will help us as we write. Our word processing skills are non-negotiable. We must know how to use the word processor. Every good writer should be familiar with the keyboard, should know how to type, and should know how to format text. You should be able to use that well. Everyone should also be able to use a reference manager. If you're managing your references manually, that is a red flag, which means that we will expect that you learn to use Zotero. We may have a session on use of Zotero, for instance. Those reference managers help you avoid plagiarism, and they also help you build a library. So if you use Zotero, for instance, you will have a very good, a very rich library that you can refer to even as you move forward. So those reference managers, and then your references, managing your references will be very easy. You can change from one referencing style to another with just a single click. And then your data analysis skills must also be very good. So you'll need to learn to use maybe NVivo, Atlas TI, or Deduce for qualitative data analysis, or maybe SPSS data or Jamovi for quantitative analysis. For data collection, it will be good if you learn how to use Kobo Toolbox. We may still come to some of these applications if we see that there is that need. And then presentation skills are also very important. You may need to learn to use Canva, maybe PowerPoint, and then effective use of infographics will also help communication. And then AI tools, I've talked about some of them. If you want to do transcription, TurboScribe, excellent tool. I recently saw that TurboScribe can transcribe Yoruba, can transcribe, I think it can transcribe Hausa also, so, and then Elicit is another AI tool that can help us with literature review or maybe research rabbits. And then as writers, we also need interpersonal intelligence. That's one kind of intelligence identified, I think, by Howard Gerard, if I'm not making a mistake. Ability to relate well with people. We need that. We need to develop our interpersonal, because when you're writing, you'll be relating with people. And it's good that you have the needed skill to relate well with people, whether you're talking about your relationship with co-authors. Sometimes co-authors can't agree, and then everything falls apart. Sometimes you can't relate well, or you can't communicate well with the editors of the journal you have selected, and then everything falls apart. So these are some other things you need to give attention to. All through the process, from the point of conception to the point of writing, doing analysis, developing manuscripts, and sending out and disseminating, it is good that we think ethics all through. We should remain ethical. Where exactly should we publish? That's a question that keeps coming up. We should publish where those who need the information we have or we wish to share will find it. Okay, so a policy brief, for instance, will target policymakers. Academics are less inclined to looking in that direction for information. So if we're targeting maybe policymakers, yes, policy briefs. And then maybe a report will go to the donor, and maybe they can have it on their website. But the journal article will target the scientific community, will target sometimes practitioners also. So the question you want to ask is, where will those who need the information I want to share find it? Where will they find it? Okay. But as I have also pointed out, for me, whether we're targeting policymakers, whether we just want to write a report and fulfill the requirements for completing our project and closing out that project, it is still important that we publish in journals. We should publish as articles in journals, because if after maybe writing briefs for policymakers and they have used the idea for decision making, you have submitted the report to donors, and you still have the data. The question is, what happens to the data? And if you pause to think about the investment in that, in the project and the study, you will agree that it's going to be a huge waste to just ignore the data, to just leave the data to rot. Okay. So my position is that after developing briefs, after writing reports, it's still important that we use the data. We maximize our use of the data by publishing in peer-reviewed journals. If you look at the definition here, a peer-reviewed journal is a periodical, typically, but that's changing. because many journals are published on an ongoing basis now. In the past, it was strictly a periodical in the sense that it was published periodically. So some journals were published maybe once a year, others maybe 2 times a year, others maybe quarterly. Okay, so that's why we talk about periodicals, and that's where you find original research findings. Usually, journals are specific to disciplines, and then every journal will subject the manuscript to peer review, a peer review process. That peer review process can be double blind, which means that the authors don't know the reviewers and the reviewers don't know the authors. And it can also be single blind, which means that the reviewers know the authors, but the authors don't know the reviewers. It is after this peer review process when reviewers are satisfied that the article is good enough to be published, that it gets published. So those ones that are published periodically, with them you see things like volume 1, number 1, which means that you're talking about the first year publication and the first issue. So in the second year, you'll see volume 2. If it's published 2 times a year, then you'll see published 2, number 1, volume 2, number 1, volume 2, number 2. And then the third year, it goes on like that, volume 3, number 1, volume 3, number 2, and things like that. Okay, but now you have journals that publish articles on an ongoing basis, which means that once that article is accepted, it is published immediately online. Key considerations in determining good journals or good outlets. The first thing is alignment with the journal scope. So if you have a manuscript, the question is, does it align with the scope of that journal? Does it align in terms of methodology? Some journals have their preferences. Some journals maybe favor statistical analysis, deep, rigorous statistical analysis. Others prefer maybe mixed methods, research, and things like that. So you need to consider the match or the alignment of your own manuscript with the scope of that journal. The other thing is the prestige and maybe the impact metrics of the journal. What's the site score? What's the impact factor of that journal? Usually, I mean, everybody wants to be published in a big journal, and it is not for nothing. Those big journals are more likely to be cited. So maybe that's one thing you want to consider. But of course, the higher the prestige, the higher the likelihood of rejection. So we should also keep this in mind. And then indexing and discoverability. So every proper journal is indexed in a database. So you want to confirm where the journal is indexed. If a journal is not indexed anywhere, then you should have nothing to do with that journal. Major databases include Web of Science and Scopus. So for me, a good journal is one that's indexed in maybe Web of Science and Scopus. Outside that, I am a little skeptical. And then another thing to consider is the target readership. Who are the people reading those journals? Who reads the journal? Some are read strictly maybe by academics, others also by practitioners, and then some have maybe a niche audience, others global audience. these are things you want to consider. If you visit a journal website, you'll get some information about the journal, and this determines your reach if you publish in such a journal. So if it's a journal that appeals maybe for people to people in the US, for instance, if you publish in that journal, it will be difficult for people outside the US to see what you have written. And then you also need to consider the peer review process and acceptance rates. For instance, some journals can keep your manuscript for up to 2 years. If you know that you don't have that luxury of time or the patience to wait for that long, then you may want to consider a journal that has a faster, a shorter review period. And then the publishing model is another thing to consider. Is it open access? If it is open access, it means that it is publicly available for readers. That is, people don't have to pay. Rather, the authors will pay article processing charge. Another option is subscription-based, which means that it means that the authors don't pay, but then readers have to pay. And I'm sure that sometimes online you would have encountered things like that. You want to read an article and you are asked to buy the article, to pay to read it, okay, or to access it through your institution. So if you encounter such a journal, we'll say that's subscription based. And then it can be hybrid, which means a combination of open access, which usually will be optional, and subscription based publishing. So in deciding, you'll need to consider the costs. Some of the open access journals charge as high as $3,000, some $5,000, and then you consider the funds available. I usually will encourage people to include this in your budgets when you're preparing the budget for a project. You should make some provision for article processing charge. And then accessibility goals for broader dissemination. If, for instance, you really wish to reach a very wide audience, then open access is preferred. So if you go online, you'll see that journals themselves have been ranked by Elsevier, and also I think Web of Science also does a ranking. Okay, so based on the ranking, journals are classified into different quartiles. That is, they're assigned ranking scores and then divided into 4 equal parts. The first part will be Q1. So that's why we talk about Q1 journals that are in the top 25%. And then Q2 journals are those in the second 25%, Q3 journals in the third 25%, and then the last 25% are Q4 journals. But I tell you that even Q4 journals, there are good Q4 journals. So there is nothing that says that that a Q4 journal is a bad journal. Keep in mind, for a journal to be ranked at all, you know that must be a good journal. It must have met some criteria for that journal to be ranked. If you look at BMC Public Health, for instance, if you go to the SciMago web page where journals are ranked. If you type the name of a journal, if you want to find out about a journal, you can type the name of that journal and you'll see how it is ranked. You'll see BMC Public Health. This is what the ranking looks like. Global Public Health, this is what the ranking looks like. And these are all Q1 journals. Health, Policy and Planning, this is what the ranking looks like. On purpose, I also included an African journal, and this is African Journal of Reproductive Health. This is a Nigerian journal, and it's a Q3 journal, and it's a good journal. Okay, so I want to encourage us all to start today. If you have data, if you have done any study and you have data, I tell you that you're sitting on a gold mine. Don't make a mess of it. Don't waste what you have. The world is waiting to read you. You have learned something that others also deserve to know. So it's fair that you go through that struggle to share what you have learned with the rest of the world. And then if we're talking about solutions, think about it this way. You have a puzzle, we have a puzzle, but there are pieces of that jigsaw puzzle scattered everywhere. And you have a piece of the puzzle. If you don't make it available to the rest of the world, it will be difficult to solve the puzzle. So see yourself as the voice of the voiceless. The world is waiting to hear you. And I wish you the very best. Thank you. Are there comments, questions?
Good morning, Prof. This is Doris.
Okay. Good morning, Doris. Yeah, questions. I see Mr. Emmanuel, you have something to say, a question to ask?
Okay, Prof. Good morning, everyone. I thought Doris wanted to say something.
Yeah, since we didn't hear her, we should just go on. She may come back later.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prof, for detailing this, and I think it's quite clear and very encouraging for us to set the ball rolling right now. And you've provided enough details, clarifications to what may be keeping some of us from making a move. So I just wanted to make some clarifications. The first one is what you presented as the first author to be. You mentioned that the first author is usually the last contributor. So I was
No. Yeah, that's an error. I pointed out that the first author makes the most contribution. That's what I meant to type there. Okay. It's just that my finger was faster than my brain. My finger was already thinking of the last author when I was typing that, but I was thinking about the first author making the most contribution. And like I mentioned, the first author does about 80% of the work.
Excellent. So thank you for clarifying that. The other clarification I have to make is also in terms of contributions from various co-authors. And, for example, you share a draft manuscript, and to people you have listed as authors and you don't find, they don't reply you or, get back to you with their contributions. And sometimes when people also reply, they leave it as questions other than leave it as questions for you to still sit down and be thinking and be revising. Meanwhile, it's a joint task. So, and instead of them to put what they think or, the right ideas will be in the manuscript. I just wanted to hear your view and what that means, and what the right of that particular co-author could mean in the final publication. And especially sometimes you also see that, for example, if we say that this person has a role to play in or contribute, maybe you put it as part of the person's performance appraisal, KPI, right? And then the person may have been listed as an author, but did not make a contribution at all, or even comes with a contribution that is not significant, but more or less like a question. How do you handle such situation, right? Then
Okay.
before I leave you to answer that, I have a contribution to also make around selecting your journal. And, and this is born out of experience. I will give an example to illustrate my comments. Some time ago, I wrote an article, and to me and to the co-authors, very beautiful article. But eventually, I did not have a journal in mind. Well, I had a journal in mind, but did not actually screen that journal to be exactly sure what aspect of that, what thematic area of that journal I could submit to, and to be sure that the topic I was writing was going to be accepted in that line. So I found myself, finishing that good work and then submitting to that journal, and then they rejected it. Instead, they pointed me to another journal who could accept the topic I have written. So I think that sometimes it's very important for the authors to, first of all, once you have penciled down your topic, and you also decide what the questions you want to answer in that manuscript, it is important to explore what journals may fit your article before you commence, so that you can write in line with the journal's language, the journal's style, and all of that. So that's the contribution I have today, because I also noticed that when I started applying these formats, it becomes easy for the journal you submit to get your paper screened and accept it for peer review first, for that to happen. Yeah, thank you, and over to you, Prof.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I agree with you. Choosing a journal is something you want to do very carefully. And like we said, if it is outside their scope, if it is different from what they would want to publish in terms of maybe your style of writing or your methodology, it will be desk rejected, which means that it won't even go through peer review. Once it gets to the editor's desk, it will be rejected. And in fact, sometimes it's a blessing for your work to be desk rejected, because if it is not rejected at that point and it goes through peer review and it gets rejected, ultimately you would have lost time. But there is also a blessing that comes with your work being rejected after it's been reviewed, because you get comments that you can use to improve the article. And I should also let you know that you should be ready to receive rejection. It is not likely that your work will never be rejected. So you should be ready for that. And it is not a problem. If you send your work out and it is rejected, it may be for many different reasons, not necessarily because the work is a bad work. So your work can be rejected. For instance, a journal can change its focus in a particular year. Let's assume, for instance, that a journal says, okay, this year, because we have deficiency, we don't have enough publications looking at third world countries. We will focus on articles about third world countries, or say low and middle income countries. If that year you bring your paper about the UK, it may not fly because they probably want things that focus, or papers, articles, manuscripts that focus on low and middle income countries at that time. Okay, so these are some of the things we should keep in mind. Select your journal with care. Think about the scope. Think about their interests, their preferences. Then the issue of authorship is very important. There is a crime, or let me say, there is an offense in the academic world that is called gift authorship. If someone does not meet this criteria for inclusion and you credit that person with authorship, you have committed an offense. And both that person and the giver, the person giving the gift and the person receiving the gift of authorship are culpable. Both are culpable, and it's a major problem. If you are discovered, you will be penalized. So it's a serious issue. If someone has not contributed substantially, and contribution, and don't forget, there are 4 different criteria. You must meet all 4. So you must contribute substantially to conceiving the study, or to designing the work, or to the acquisition of the data, or to the analysis of the data, or to the interpretation of the data. So that's compulsory. And then in addition to that, you must write that paper, the manuscript, or you must review it critically, which means that you must make significant contribution to the paper. Okay. Let me read what we have here. It says drafting the work or reviewing it critically for important intellectual content. So if you have not done this, then you're not an author. If someone puts your name, that person is committing an offense. And you, the receiver of the gift, you are also culpable. Okay, so it's a serious issue. Nobody should expect to be credited with authorship if they have not contributed significantly to writing. And what we're saying is it's not enough to condemn. You should be able to suggest ways of improving the work. So it's not just about asking questions. The suggestion should be clear as to how that work can be improved. So we will leave it that way. And I think many of these things, we also learn them as we do them. Yeah, Titi Lokwe. Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, thank you so much, Prof, for the session. I've learned quite a lot. I have 2 questions, and these were my reflections yesterday. So I was thinking about how can I clearly distinguish between findings, interpretation, and recommendation without an overlap when writing a report. So I was started with the responsibility of writing a report for gender norms, and it was clear that I have interpretation of some of the findings. And I just want to be very clear with what the findings are, what the interpretation are, and the recommendation in the report. Or is it fine to clearly overlap everything for the reader to interpret on their own? And my second question would be that what distinguishes an excellent report from an average one in real time? I would really love to know. Thank you, sir.
Okay. An excellent report and an average report, and then the other thing is about interpretations, findings, and recommendations. So those things are connected. If you're interpreting, you're telling us what the results mean. What's the meaning of the results that you have presented, and then it's based on this that you will say this is what you have found. For instance, if you're talking about your findings, you will need to go back to the objectives or to the purpose. Read out to yourself each objective and then ask yourself, how does my study answer this first objective, this first question? So that's the way I will deal with the findings. So you want to go back to the objectives of the study or the research questions, take them one after the other, and then look at how your results help answer each of those research questions. So you will see that your findings will actually build on your interpretation of the results. So there is significant overlap. However, the way you present them will be slightly different in the sense that while interpreting your findings, you're helping the reader understand the meanings of, for instance, if you say that there is a significant association between a mother's level of education and maybe exposure to female genital mutilation. Okay, so that's your results. But when you interpret this, you're not telling us what this really means in the context of that study. And then your recommendations will build. Your recommendations should be solution focused. So what's the solution to this thing that we have found out? So you'll see that even the recommendations will still be based on those findings. So there is significance. There is significant overlap in interpretations, in what's the other one now? In our interpretations, in our findings, and then in our recommendations. So with our interpretations, we're just coming with we're coming out of the results, the raw results that maybe the tests has revealed or the thematic analysis of a qualitative study has revealed. And then we're showing the meanings that those results have. So that's how I will treat I will describe interpretation. But then in talking about my findings, I want to go back to the research questions and then provide answers using these results, using these interpretations. I want to answer those research questions. And then my recommendations will be solutions, proposed solutions to the issues based on those findings. So that's how I will deal with that. Your second question is what differentiates between an average and an excellent? I mean, I think that's a difficult, but for me, it's essentially about uh, those little bits, those little things that make up the report. So it's about excellence in everything, which means that uh, from your language, your choice of words, your presentation, um, your style of writing, if in each of these things you pursue excellence, then it turns out to be an excellent report. If the report is concise, a major challenge I see, for instance, is that we leap a lot in writing. That is, the writing is not focused. You're writing about a particular thing and then you just jump from that idea into something else. And sometimes you come back, at other times you just deviate completely. If it is not focused, then it can't be excellent. If it is not clear, it can be excellent. If it is not concise, if it is not consistent, if it is not current, um, it can't be excellent. So the work will be average if maybe it has some strengths and also has some weaknesses. So that gives us maybe an average report. But if it is excellent in clarity, if it is excellent in terms of uh, uh, how concise it is, if it is excellent in consistency, and all these things are related, because if the work is not consistent, it makes for very difficult, tedious reading. Then if it is excellent in terms of concentration, in terms of focus, if it is excellent in currency, if the language is good, if it is well edited, such that you don't have so much noise in the form of grammatical blunders, then you will say it is excellent. So I mean, I'll sum up that by saying excellence, overall excellence is excellence in those little things. Excellence in the little things. If you put them together, you have excellence on the whole. I hope that's helpful, Titi.
Yes, it was. Thank you so much.
Okay. So, is there any other comment, question before we bring the session to a close? Okay, Glory.
Yes, sir. So I
Yeah,
have
over to
a
you.
question on secondary data. I was asking
Okay.
if it's compulsory for a paper to be based on primary data, and is it acceptable to submit a paper that just relies on secondary data from desk review?
Yes.
And do we have journals
Well,
that?
so secondary data does not necessarily mean desk review. There are different things. But if you're using secondary data, if for instance you acquire the demographic and health survey data, if you're using secondary data, it means that you're using data that was collected for a different purpose or for a different study, and then you now want to use it to answer your own research questions. So if you get the DHS data or you get the mixed data and you do your own secondary analysis, and yeah, you can publish it. So there is nothing that says that you must collect fresh data. No, there is nothing that says that. And then reviews are also published. So people do systematic reviews that can also be published. So there is no rule that says that your study has to be primary. That is, you have to collect primary data. No, there is no such rule. And in fact, we advise people to explore the demographic, all these nationally representative studies. We encourage people to explore them, do serious analysis beyond what you have in the reports, and possibly publish them. And if you go online, you will see so many studies, so many works published from the Demographic and Health Survey all over the world, hundreds and thousands of them. Okay, Bukola.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Prof. I'd like to ask that some journals that have been published by departments across higher institutions, how do we rate those kind of journals? You know, are we going to say they are of international standards, or, you know?
Well,
or
I mean, so many of them are local. So many of them are not indexed. Whether you go to Web of Science or you're doing your search on Scopus. If, for instance, you go to Simago, you can do a search for any journal there. Many of them are not, because the criteria for indexing are also very, very stringent. The requirements are sometimes difficult to meet. So many of our journals, especially in Nigeria, many of them have not met, even though I know that, okay, so a database that is easier to meet will be maybe Google Scholar. So, and there are levels. So yeah, maybe on Google Scholar you'll find some of them, but not all of them are indexed. Some of them are just coming up. For instance, the University of Lagos, the UNILAG Sociological Review, that journal went online just last year. And before a journal can be indexed, it must be published for a number of years. There must be consistency in publishing before they can be, before those journals can be indexed. So many of our journals are not there yet, even though we recognize the fact that they're coming up. Yeah, Mr. Emmanuel.
Yeah, thank you, Prof, for providing the clarifications you did. I just wanted to also shed more light to Gloria's question. You know, sometimes, like you mentioned, you actually don't need primary data. And sometimes you might also not analyze secondary data. But you see, if you go to different journals, because I can perceive the angle she is coming from, she may say, I don't analyze, I don't sit on any data, even I can work with my team members to analyze and also write. But the good thing is that from your wealth of experience as a BD, for example, you can, if you go to some of these journals, you see different types of articles that they publish. Some might be original research, some might be position papers or letter to the editor or commentaries and all of that, that will also accommodate the kind of ideas or data that you may have to put forward, as long as you have a scientific argument to share with the public. So different categories of publication or articles that different journals accept. And however, for different journals too, they vary according to what they call commentaries. What my journal may call commentary might be different from what Prof's journal may call commentary. So the requirement for publishing it as commentary. So that is why it is important to do what Prof has already recommended, to explore the journals and understand where your idea and the available evidence that you have or you want to communicate fits in. Thank you, and over.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
sir.
Yeah, thank you for adding your voice to that. And in fact, for all of us, depending on what we're studying, I think it's good to explore the DHS. We should find time to explore the DHS. For instance, those working on demographic and on gender-based violence, usually there is a session for, there is a section in the reports and in the data in the study for GBV. Another one for women's empowerment. It's good that we explore the data and, if possible, publish from the data, because the DHS data is publicly available. Okay, so yes, it's possible to explore secondary data and possibly publish whatever our analysis shows. Okay, so no hands up. Oh, okay. Mr. Nee.
Yeah, good morning, Prof. Thank you so much for this session. Quite informative. And of course, I just want to lend a voice to what Glory mentioned. And thank you, Mr. Emmanuel, for also clarifying it further. It's just to add a little to it. And I think another angle to look at it is I'm seeing someone saying, can I do systematic literature review and also publish it? Kind of thing. So that, number one, I am not doing any data analysis. I'm not going to whether secondary or primary data. And at the same time, I've gone into the literature. I've done so many literature, so much literature combing then, either systematically or otherwise, then I want to publish, because I also feel that I've done some work and I could get some findings and all or consensus from the literature. I think that is also, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Glory. So if that be the case, I think it's also acceptable. There are journals that also allow for publication of systematic literature review. So if you do it very well, there are frameworks for it and all of that, then you can also publish them. So that's my contribution. Thank you so much, Prof. Again. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I think with this we should just bring this session to a close. We have gone past the hour. Thank you all for joining, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
so much,
Thank you.
sir.
Thank you, and bye.
Grateful.